And I'm here to talk about flows. If you've been hiding, know what flows are, but otherwise, you'll notice that you're finding more and more need to know and use and manipulate and monitor and edit flows. We can make about a dozen kinds of flows with Salesforce Core, and talking to the product leads for flow, they're supporting something like 26 kinds of flows that are either that are part of specialty license types. So I mean, it's just in our future, and it's not an easy thing to live with. I wish flow were a little computer science based, but it isn't. So this first video is how to live with the Salesforce list, and my second flow will be about how to live with the editor and do some things inside the editor that will make your life easier. If you're in a team, these are super important. And hear this, all you lone wolf admins, even not being in a team, you need to think like a team. You're a team member with the next person who comes after you in your lone wolf administration. You're a team member with the person who came before you. You're a team member from 4 years ago. So think like a team, even if you're a lone wolf. Okay, let's get started on the list view inside of Salesforce. So I'm in settings. I am not at all a fan of the that they provided. The reason is very simple, because they're ignoring versions, which are super important, and yet they're exposing it a little bit in a way that's thoroughly confusing. So I don't recommend using it yet. Perhaps it will become functional eventually. I know, but I wouldn't use it unless you have to. So you'll start off with the all flows view. You can pin it there. I highly recommend that you use the edit button to rename it flow. And it's possible I made this, but I don't think so. I think, and they let you rename it. Sometimes you have to make a brand new one in order to rename it, but you don't want anybody, including yourself, going over here and adding filter criteria to this, because they're persistent. And you really want this to not lie to you when it says all flows. So I always add, don't edit filter. The next thing you need to do is always, always, always put this is version. Put that first so that you know right away, because it changes the behavior of things you click on. You really need to know that you have a more recent versions. And then put the active button, put your label, and notice that I'm always naming ours that we write with SYM. That was important a long time ago, and it's more important now. Flows are coming into your org from all over the place. Salesforce Core is adding all kinds of flows with or without your permission. Managed packages are adding flows. All kinds of people are adding flows, and you want to be able to figure out the ones you wrote versus the ones someone else wrote. So create your own little naming convention by putting your 3-letter acronym up front. You'll probably want to know the name of the flow. You'll probably want to know what object you want to know, the trigger. You may want it is. You'll definitely. I find that I use mostly triggering object 8 modified. Frequently, I just want to work with the flow that I most recently edited, and this will do it. I can sort by that, and here we are. Do notice that in order to see the versions, you have to pull down, unfortunately, and go to details and view all. So that's kind of I think we've now covered the first topic. First of all, naming yours. I know there's all kinds of other videos on naming conventions. Best of luck with that. Flow has evolved to these naming conventions to remain very stable. But I tell you, you will never stop doing it if you start naming all of your custom object that you add with a 3-letter acronym. It doesn't take much of your character limit, and you will be so happy to know that that's an object, that's a field, that's a flow, that's a list view, that's a landing page that you created versus all the other places that are flowing into your org these days. So use your TLA in your flow name. and then use the flow list view and reorder it so that those important fields, inactive, most recent field, and active, are right there at the very beginning, because it changes a lot of things just knowing those two things. I won't go into that, but it does. Um, the other thing that you need to do before you go here, you need to create yourself a second list view. You might not know how to do that. You pull down the little settings icon and hit clone this, and then you can rename it and change the fields that are shown. But here's what you want to do. You want to create a second flow list view that is flows by name, and give yourself instructions and your team members instructions, edit filter. Really, you should do this across all your list views. If it's an all, rename it or replace it to say, don't edit filter. And if it's something you want people to quickly go to edit the filter, give them that prompt in the name of it, edit filter, make it visible to everybody, and then they know to hit the funnel and change the filter. And we always use flow label contains, and we can, and if you're working, flow button, or in this case, flow button, comma, which means or, Simon U. And when I'm done with that implementation project, I might completely replace that flow label with something else. Or if I have an overlapping set of projects that I'm working on, I might put another comma. But that lets me find just the list, the flow labels that are related to what I'm working on right now. Okay, so that's your second one, is create this flows by name, edit filter view, and give yourself permission and get used to editing the flows. There are too many flows to go hunting for the right one. All right, so that's our second hint. Third, you want to use this views detail, view details and versions. You want to use it well, and you want to use it right. So this is a flow that's been around in my org. Let's get rid of that. Since October 20, because that's when the first flow is there. It's an inactive flow. Every inactive flow here represents a major release, meaning it was put into production. Every other version has been removed by me. And we always change the information that you can control inside the flow editor. I'll show you where in a second. We always change the information to have one sentence about what the flow does. Limit it to one sentence. And then the second line should be formatted. It isn't in this one. It should be REV : as in the revision information, and say what changed in this major release. That way you have a history. So here we are back in October. It's the initial release. Second, second, right afterwards, obviously we put the first one into production, then we found some problem, or we found some pressing immediate need that we could address, and we made another version, and it turned out 2 versions later. 7 was an instance that we just deleted. And put some notes into what we did. Updated to use some kind of manual variable that was a hack due to a winter 24 bug. Okay, so there you go. That's what happened. Then, updated it again. And then it sat idle and stable, and that's what you want, for over 6 months. Major revision cost us 2, so it wasn't too major. And it sat there for almost 6 months. And then we made a pretty big change that was very experimental, very hard to get right. And it took, almost 20 versions of interim. And this is my active release. And the only reason we have something else is because I made some changes just for us to see. I'm going to open this. Note, if I have an inactive version, this is the only way to open the most active version from settings, is to open it. If you click on the name, it's always going to open the one that's active. Very confusing. That is ironed out, admittedly, in the flow that's not under settings, but none of the version information is available or visible under the flow application, automation application. So I do not like it. So I'm going to open this just to show you where we edit this information. I'll have covered everything while it's opening. Naming convention, we've talked about the list view. We've talked about making a second list view that you edit, and we've talked about making good use of this description field and cleaning up your interim versions, but leaving every major release because it's important history that you need to have. Admittedly, you could have that in your version control, but most flow declarative admins are not using version control today. I hope that changes, but it's not easy to do right now. Salesforce hasn't enabled it very easily, so most people aren't, including me. So here is my flow, and this settings icon is where we can set the information. Always make this be what your flow does, and just keep it to one sentence and not a long, complicated sentence. It needs to be simple enough. You know what it is. Hopefully it doesn't actually change much over time. And then I personally like to say rev : and if it's the first one, say initial release. And every time erase what was there before and write what the major release is you're doing. And that can be the same for all your little minor releases, but that you're just going to delete until you get to the major release. So that's how you do it. Notice under advanced, that's where you can do some things like important flows don't get the new API automatically. And I regret to say there's a reason to get the new API automatically. Salesforce does not guarantee not to break it when it goes to the next API. And for sure, I have seen poor releases come out from Salesforce that absolutely break flows when you upgrade to the new version. Change it from the normal users context to context with either all access data. This particular flow actually mode. So I'm going to cancel. Now we have covered all of the ways to live with the list view in Salesforce. So talk about it in the next video, which will be a little longer. I'm going to talk about text templates and what they're for and some unusual uses for them. I'm going to talk about using fake blocks a lot to better understand your code, for better debugging your code, and ultimately for giving yourself a very poor man's mass delete. And then finally, I'm going to talk about my hack, which is the closest I can come for a poor man's version of block copy. It's only useful when you're refactoring your code into subflows so you can use it somewhere else. There is no solution that I know of for copying flow amongst from one copying flow to another. Salesforce has not deemed to save us that time as of yet. So that's what's coming in the next flow, which will be uploaded today also. Bye.